don't because the connection is kind of a challenge. So on that note, I am recording and we are going to go ahead and get started. So I'm going to share my screen and let me go in and admit somebody else. Okay. All right. So again, we are talking about probate versus trust. What's the difference? Why is it it's so important for you to know before you even go out on the listing appointment? So I'm just going to run through some of the basics. Most of you should understand what a property profile is. If you don't know what a property profile is, we have a class for that. But in your property profile, you have this thing called a grant deed. This grant deed is how we determine who is entitled. And I know this may sound like the basics, but I have to start at the beginning so we know where we're going. So when you get your property profile and you're reading through and you find out that you have an owner, and in this scenario, Brigitte Mizakian, I believe is how you would say it, is our current owner. So if you are going out on a listing appointment and she is not the one that is signing your contract, there's your first clue. Okay, so if Brigitte, who is on title, is not the one signing your listing agreement, you have an issue. The sooner you communicate that information over to us at title, the better off you are, so we can help you through the process. So I'm not asking you to memorize this information today, but what I am asking is communication. So if it is, we'll say for lack of better words, you know, a sister, or a cousin, a mother, a son, if it's somebody in the family that's signing for her, your listing agreement, we need to know a couple of things. First thing is why? Why isn't she signing? And in this scenario, Brigitte is on title as an unmarried woman, meaning that she is on title by herself. So she's the only one legally authorized to sign. Sorry, she's legally the only one that's authorized to sign that particular listing agreement for you. So on that note, you want to make sure that if it is somebody besides Brigitte, why? First question. If they say, oh, that's my mom and she passed away, we now know at this point, at this point, she owns it by herself, so you are doing a probate. If she was in title as a joint tenant, or somebody else was community property with a right of survivorship, you would have a way to avoid probate because she's entitled by herself and she has passed away. That would mean this equals probate, okay? So just for ease and simplicity, if your seller, not Brigitte, if the person that's signing your listing agreement says, I have a will, and it tells me that I can do whatever I want with the property. A will equals probate because the will is just the wishes that that person had. And now they have to go to court to have the judge agree to what their wishes were. Will equals probate, no will definitely equals probate, okay? And then this last one where it says trust equals no probate, we're gonna go through that at the next section of this particular presentation. So if they mention they have a will and they're entitled by themselves, that means that we're going to probate. If they mention that they have a trust, we're gonna cover that in just a little bit. All right. Any questions so far? If so, feel free to unmute yourself. Let me admit somebody else. Hold on just a second. Okay. All right. So now that we've decided, oh my gosh, Brigitte is not alive and she owned the property by herself, we know we're going into probate. So the first thing I'm going to ask you is, what's the value of that particular property? So if it's a piece of property that is less than $55,425, you can do a very simple type of estate process. You don't need to go to court. but you do need a couple of things. This slide is provided to us by an attorney. Her name is Leah Larkin. She does our probates when we get in depth to what probate looks like. She's the one that does our classes for me. But she went ahead and provided this so that we would have just kind of a talking point today. So if the estate value is 55,450 or less, you could avoid probate court by doing just a few things. And this process typically will take 4 to 6 weeks if everybody participates at a very high level and they get the paperwork done. That being said, most of you are probably thinking, well, Christy, we're in the state of California. Who the heck has property that's less than 55,450? You would be surprised. So we have people that maybe have a piece of vacant land that they didn't put into the trust because they forgot about it. So that could be one, or they never had a trust and so now they need to do something with it. So that might be a possibility to exercise this particular option. Another option might be if there are 4 people on title, but they don't have it with the right of survivorship, meaning they have it as tenants in common. If their interest is in the property is less than this amount, we could apply this rule to it, okay? The next value is 55,450 or 426, I'm sorry, up to 166,249. So in that range, you can still avoid a full-blown probate, but you do have to have a court hearing. You do have to have an inventory and appraisal. There are attorney's fees if you're using one. And the owner, seller are the beneficiaries, meaning they're the ones that are receiving the money, the person. So the first level is less than 55,425. The second level is the next one. And again, we can apply this to a property, and we're dealing with one right now where the property value is 350, and there are 4 people in title. So the one person that's passed away, we're applying this particular rule to because it falls into it. So they're going to go to one court hearing and they're going to do a couple of things, and we can typically accomplish this in about 2 months. So this first one is 4 to 6 weeks, and this is about 2 months if it falls into that category. Okay. And then if the property value is over this 166,250, you are now in what we like to call a full probate. That to us is a sigh of, okay, we tried everything we possibly could to avoid the situation. However, you are going to have to go to court, and it will take a while for it to go through, and it depends on the parties involved. So if there is one person handling the estate and there are no other heirs, like no siblings, no extended family that might say, oh my gosh, that's my long lost cousin and I think she gave me that property. As long as none of that happens, we have seen a probate go as fast as 3 to 4 months. However, if you have even one little argument with one person and that one person says, no, I want 50% of it. It states, you know, I'm only supposed to get 25, but I think she told me that I was supposed to get 50%. Now, when there's an argument in the, what we call the heirs of the estate, that probate is stretched out because now you have to have another hearing to have everyone discuss what they feel or they know is their potential interest in the property. The other thing I want to mention about this full probate, it does cost a significant amount of money because you are most of the time hiring an attorney because you don't want to do this one by yourself at all. I wouldn't even do the second one by yourself. So these two, I would say you're going to have attorney's fees, and the attorney's fees are hourly rates, right? So the more they have to meet with the attorney, the more they have to, you know, squabble over the money, that kind of settlement, you know, who's getting what, the more expensive it is. Probate costs for the court and the filings are mandated by the state of California. So that's all the same price. But once you get an attorney involved, it depends on how much you spend or how much time you spend with the attorney, etc. And then the spousal petition order, that's a whole nother situation that we're going to cover in the trust. So these are the 3 levels that we like to try to apply to a probate, and we hope that they're always at this level. If not, maybe this level is the second option. Once we get to here, we have to take a sigh of relief, make sure it's on a probate form, and that the buyer is patient and ready to go. I believe you have to do the probate form for these 2, but that's a broker question. So make sure your buyer is patient and they are aware that it is a probate and it will take a significant amount of time. The attorney would be the one that gives you that particular time frame. Okay. All right. I have some handy dandy handouts that I'm going to be able to send to you. I can send the whole presentation if you are so interested. But what it does go over, hold on just a second. I'm trying to admit somebody else. Okay. What it does go over, what are the terms? What does it mean when you have to go to court? Who's the court clerk? What's the, what's a petition? How's a discharge work? All of those terms are mentioned on this particular flyer. Again, this is the basics of how you understand if you are in a probate or if you need a trust applied to your situation. It's not the full-blown probate class, but I will send you this. It is a real easy to understand. Here's what we're doing when it comes to probate. The other thing that I want to mention is this is the flyer that we send out to the client as soon as we find out, like, okay, this is going to probate. We want you to have some guidelines. This is a cut and dry. You're going to probate, you already have, the knowledge that you need to probate, you have an attorney.
I gave you all of them.
Okay, whoever that was, can you mute yourself? Sorry. So the title requirements on this particular flyer give you the specifics of what we need as a title company. Now, when you give this to the attorney is going to say, yeah, I know exactly what they need, but we ask that you give it to them anyway because some attorneys are old school and we don't want them to find out at the last minute that we needed something additional because of today's type of market. So in probate, the 2 things that I want to talk about in depth, not the whole probate thing, but the 2 things that I like to point out is we love for your client to have what's called full authority. So when they go to court, we really want the judge to give your seller, the person signing your listing agreement, we want them to have this thing called full authority. It is so important for them to be able to handle the paperwork without going back and forth to court. The other option is this limited authority. That's not what we want. Sometimes it happens, but I'll tell you the differences between the 2 real quickly. So you have the full authority, and these are the items that we're going to need from the attorney and the court. We are going to need certified letters, and trust me, when you get to this point, we're going to hand walk you through this. We need certified letters, we need a notice of proposed action, a letter from the attorney that there are no objections, etc. I know you know how to read, and I'd be more than happy to send this to you. Full authority says this particular person that has been appointed can sign and can sell the property without another court hearing to make sure that the sales price, etc., has been met. Okay? The limited authority. Here's the one thing you need to know about limited. So if you get the paperwork and you have a limited authority person selling the property, you need to make sure that you are prepared to go to court as well as the buyers to go to court the day that they have the last hearing. And the reason being is that day, someone can come in and outbid your buyer, and that transaction that you've been in for 3-4 months can be totally wiped out because somebody else outbid them that last day. Okay? So that's why we really want the full authority. It just means the judge has already looked at everything that's been presented. They found that the person that has been selected is qualified to handle it. If you have a limited authority, there's a little something that's going on in your file. that you just need to be aware of. So we're going to help you again when you get to the stage. We won't just send you the flyer and say, good luck. Let us know if you have any questions. We want to try and help you through every step so that we're going to keep in touch on a regular basis. Like, what did you have? What did you get from the attorney, etc. So those are the two types of authority that are given. And we want to make sure, like I said, that we look for the full authority. If not, limited authority would be stated on the forms. Okay. All right. So that's the basics of the probate. And so I'm just going to run back through that because we had some people jump on about 5 minutes in, and I know that I've gone through a lot. So first thing we do is we check to make sure that the grant deed that we have has the right person signing your listing agreement. If somebody else besides this person is signing, then you will need to figure out why. If it's because they've passed away and they are the only owner on the property, you have a probate, okay? Remember, if they say, well, I have a will, I don't need to probate it, will means they have to probate it. No will means they have to probate it. If they have a trust, that is the one way that we can avoid a probate, okay? Then if we've decided that they have to go to probate, the next thing I always ask is, what's the value of that property? Let's look to see if there's a different way to avoid like the full probate, this full probate right here. We're going to look at the values. We're going to hopefully find something that will apply to that rule or that property so that we can help them through the process faster, but do it legitimately through the courts or the process that's required. So again, the values are here, 55,450. These are new amounts that started in 2020. It used to be less, so they just got a bump up in the values. So these new values are here, 55,426 to 166,249, and then 166,250 is a full probate. Anything over that value, you're going to court and you're going to be in the process for a while. Okay, so these are understanding probate terms. I'm going to send that to you, and then remember we went over, we want to make sure that they get full authority. If they have limited authority, you want to make sure that your buyer is prepared to go to court on the day of the last hearing to make sure that they're not outbid. Okay, so those are the basics of what you need to know when you're getting into a probate. And then once we've determined which section of the probate code we're in, we will walk you through the steps and the items that we need as a title company in order to proceed. Typically, if you don't have an attorney for the lesser value properties, these particular properties, we can refer you to a paralegal or an attorney. We don't prepare the documents, and neither does escrow. So either your parties would prepare them and pray that they're done right, or you would hire a paralegal or an attorney to get them prepared for you. Okay? All right. So we're going to just assume that your seller did have a trust. Thank you, Lord. I can't tell you how many times I say to a homeowner, you know, gosh, it'd be great if you could put your property in a trust. It will save your heirs the heartache and the headache of going through probate should anything happen to you. And I don't sell trusts. I mean, I don't make a dime on them, but I will say that if it were my family member that was in this situation, I would hate to send them to probate court because it's such a problem right now, especially with COVID, and they're just barely opening back up, and so there's the delays from that. So let me check. Let's see. Somebody put something in the chat. Oh, okay. All right. So how do we determine if your property is in a trust, right? So we go back to that same property profile that we mentioned. You want to look at the grant deed when you get the property profile. The grant deed clearly says on this one that Daniel and Michelle own this particular property in a trust. And so we would be able to say, okay, this property is owned in a trust. And so the people that would be signing your contract are the people that are listed as what's called the trustee or trustees. So in this scenario, Daniel B. Seymour and Michelle D. Seymour are the trustees of their own trust. So they would need to sign as trustees. So the vesting on your contract should be all of this, according to what I verified this. The attorney says this should be your vesting on your listing agreement. When you go to the signature lines, it will be their names as as trustees. So it will be Daniel B. Seymour, comma, trustee. Okay, so your listing agreement must match the owners. All right. So again, you get the property profile, you look at the profile, you look at the deed, and it says Daniel B. and Michelle D. Seymour, they're trustees of the trust. I'm going to jump into something else right now because I want to cover this. We're in a refinance craze right now in our marketplace. And some people are refinancing their properties and they have to pull their property out of a trust so that they can refinance it. And then the lender says, oh, you could just put it back in the trust after closing. Well, a typical homeowner may not understand how important that is to get done right away. So if they say, oh yeah, I own my property in a trust, and you see where they pulled it out of a trust and maybe put on a new loan and then forgot to put it back in, call me immediately. We have it's called the Hegstead Act. We can apply that. Again, they have to go to court, but we have to see some paperwork. So if they feel that they own the property in a trust, it was in a trust at one point, it came out and they just never put it back in, call me immediately. We'll work through the process of trying to get that proven, but it will take an attorney or themselves to be very judicious and go do a Hegstead Act at the court. That would be something that does pop up when they think they own it in a trust. We can avoid probate that way though, so just note that to yourself. All right, so now that we've noticed that they own the property in a trust, there's a couple of things. People always say, well, okay, what are you going to need from title side if they own the property as a trust? Well, if the trustees are signing, if they are signing your contract, we will only need a trust certification. And there's one of two ways that you get it. They either have it with their trust, it's already been prepared for them, or we send you the prelim, and at the very last page, we send you a blank one. They can prepare a new one for themselves by handwriting or typing in the correct information on it. So we're going to assume your trustees are signing, and so we would only need a trust certification. We need that to close. We cannot close without a trust certification if the trustees are signing your contract. But what happens if your trustees are not signing your contract? So remember, we have two people. We have Daniel and we have Michelle on the contract. We're going to say that Daniel's not signing. Daniel has passed away, okay? Sorry, Daniel, didn't need to do that to you. But if Daniel is not signing your contract, but Michelle is, then we will need a full copy of the trust. Not one page, not 2 pages. We need a full copy of the trust. We need to see what happens when that person passes away. We don't prepare the trust. We don't write the rules and regulations of the trust. The actual trustees do that. So your trustees that prepared their trust with an attorney or a paralegal or did it themselves, they have a bunch of ideas about what they want to happen should someone pass away. So if the trustee, Daniel, passed away, and we look at the trust, we can see what happens if one of them passes away. It may allow the other person to sign on behalf of them, and then we would just need a death certificate, not a pending one. We need to have the cause of death. So if they recently passed away, make sure that your death certificate is not pending the reason for death. We need an actual cause of death. So that being said, we will need a death certificate and an affidavit of death of trustee. That can all be done during the escrow period. But it's so much better to know early. like during the listing period or during the first day or two of your escrow, that you're going to need a death certificate. A couple of reasons. Your seller is packing. All of those important papers are being put away. And it's the worst feeling for me to have sent you a prelim and told you that we need a copy of the death certificate to find out 3 days before we're closing that they never got it to escrow and packed up and it's in a moving van on its way across the country, because then we can't close. So if we need a copy of the death certificate, we are going to need it before we close, and it will need to state the cause of death. So that's if your trustees are not signing. So if your trustees are signing, we just need this trust certification. If one of the parties is not signing, we will need a copy of the trust. So I want to touch on a couple of other scenarios on the trust. We've addressed the death. If one dies, we need a death certificate. We're going to stay with Daniel being the one that's now our issue. We're going to say that he's mentally or physically incapacitated. So if he has fallen and he's in a coma, or if there's something that has caused him to have a physical limitation, like maybe he's had a stroke of some sort, and you need to have just the one person signing, that means that we're going to need a full copy of the trust. Just because he's still with us doesn't change the rules. If there are 2 trustees, we need 2 signatures. If there are 2 trustees and only one is signing, we need a full copy of the trust. Because inside that trust, it's going to tell us what we need to do in the event of mental or physical incapacitation. So if Daniel cannot sign because he's lost the mobility on one hand, his signing hand, then it will tell us what we will need to obtain. It could be one doctor's note that states that he's physically incapable of signing, or it could be 2 doctor's notes. We don't make up the rules. We read the trust and we apply the rules that the trust has set up to protect the trustees, okay? So people get frustrated with me when I go, hey, it looks like we're gonna need a couple of doctor's notes that show that the seller or the trustee is mentally incapacitated. So if I tell you we need 2 doctor's notes, it's not because we dreamt it up or we want to make your life miserable, because that's not the way we operate. But we are reading their wishes that they put in their trust for themselves. And so then we have to just apply their wishes because it's their trust, not ours. And at some point, they said we need 2 doctor's notes. So maybe they just don't trust somebody in their family. I don't know. Maybe they would think, oh, maybe we'll just say they're mentally crazy like Christy and she'll be able to do something about it. But yes, we apply the rules of the trust. So if it's mental or physical incapacitation, again, we do need a full copy of the trust and we will apply the rules that they set up. Okay? All right. So I have this lovely little handout or a flyer that I'm going to send if you are interested. It does talk about who are the parties in the trust. What are the words like trustee? Those are typically the people that started the trust. They're also typically the beneficiaries. Could be that they have beneficiaries that are their children as well. So we have some of these terminologies set out for you so that it's easier for you. Here's what I always say. If it's easier for you to send this to your client that says understanding the trust, we're good with that. All of these flyers that we send to you have been created by an attorney. As long as you don't change the wording, then you are fine. You won't be liable for any misrepresentation as long as you send it in the format that we send it to you in, okay? And so then it talks about a couple of things that I want to go through. Can a trust hold title to real property? The trust doesn't hold title to the property, but the trustees do. So I want to specifically say this because it's confusing. Someone will say, I'm going to go ahead and put my property in a trust. And so they'll label it their property address. Like we see this more with investors. It's the 11501 Silverado Way Trust. And then they record that. Well, the problem is there's nobody that's alive. It's an object. So the 11501, the house, can't sign for the trust. So now what you've done is you've tied up that property into a situation that we need to address because that house can't sign paperwork. So a living being must be a trustee of the trust in order for the trust to be done properly. So you'd always need to have someone's name as the trustee, and it could be of their family trust or revocable trust or their property trust. It just needs to make sure that there's a living trustee that has the authorization to sign. So there's a couple of other things that I want to mention. Can the trustee borrow money? Yes, they can borrow money. They can do the refinance. Some lenders will allow it, some lenders will not. That's when I said make sure that if they've taken their property out of a trust to do a refinance, that they put it back in the trust before something terrible happens. Okay? All right, so I'm just going to wrap this up by saying I'm going to go through this with questions that you have that are specific to you. Honestly, it's one of those where I don't necessarily want to talk for an hour. I want to be able to give you the basics. Have you think about it? What does it apply to? Maybe a transaction that you're in or one that you need somebody to look at now that you go, oh my gosh, I have an issue. So I'm going to stop screen sharing. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to say, if you have questions, now is the time because I want to make sure that I get them answered. Okay, I have a question from Roland. How does a conservatorship affect a probate? If you have a conservatorship, that means that that person is still alive. It just means that they're not capable of making the decisions themselves. If it's a court-appointed conservator, as long as the documents are prepared correctly for selling their home, that can be done. So typically a conservatorship is done when there's no trust. It's done when someone has become mentally or physically incapacitated and can no longer handle business for themselves. Conservatorships do go through the process of being heard in front of a judge. So that's a great question, Roland. I hope I answered your question. If not, feel free to drop that question back into the chat and tell me I didn't understand. There's a question. Who can people go to put a property into a trust? Oh, great question, Aurora. I don't necessarily recommend someone. What I try to do is I try to put the person or the family that is going through the scenario with someone that's close in proximity to them so it's convenient. I have attorneys that I work with pretty much everywhere. I have, like one in Redlands, I have one in Beaumont, I have one in Riverside, I have one in LA, Orange County. I have them all over. So I try to match their needs because they don't want to have to drive 30 or 40 miles to go see an attorney when someone like maybe 2 miles away can do the same job, if not better, and maybe less expensive because they're closer to home. So hopefully that answered your question.
So it's an attorney though, right?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
It would be an attorney though, right?
To prepare a trust?
Yes.
You can have an attorney prepare it. A paralegal can do it as well.
Okay.
There are online forms that you can get. Not that I'm saying that they're not great, but they're not great. Sometimes they think that they're going to save themselves, $1,000.
Yeah.
What they truly did is they created this trust, did it incorrectly, didn't do the deed from the trust into their, and then all of a sudden they're in probate and they're really mad at themselves for not spending the money to have it properly done.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for the good question. All right, any other questions that I'm missing? Get a will to avoid probate. No, get a trust to avoid probate. Yes, I know. Sometimes they do tell you, have a will. It'll help you avoid probate. No, what it does is it just tells the judge exactly what you want when you get to probate. I hate to say that, but I personally only have one home, one child, one husband, one dog. I'm a one kind of wonder. And so I thought, I don't need it. And then I realized, several years back, I was like, yeah, I do. Because I have the one home, the one husband, the one son, the one dog. At some point, I don't want them to have to go to court to figure out what would have happened in the event of my death and my husband's death at the same time. So I did a trust, and it's the best thing I could have done. I feel like I sleep a little better at night. Okay, so Lacey, I see you have a question. During the probate, when can you list the property for sale? Excellent, excellent, excellent. Once you have the right person that can sign. If they have a will, you most likely, this is a broker question, so you're gonna definitely wanna ask your broker, Lacey, or anyone, but you will definitely wanna see what that will says. And if the will says it's somebody completely different than the person that's signing your paperwork, I'd be a little leery of them, just me. But if the will says it's them, then you might have that conversation. Hey, we're going to do this on a probate form. It looks like you're going to need to go to probate, but it does mention that you would be hopefully the one that's been appointed to handle it. So we can start the process, but talk to your broker. You may not want to put it live right away, because in the market that we're in, you put that bad boy live, it's gonna sell, and then all of a sudden you're gonna be sitting in court for 3 to 4 months. If it's one of those longer ones, you could also put it on a probate form and just disclose that this is at the beginning stages of the probate. If your buyer has plenty of time and they're willing to wait through the process, you just want to disclose. Worst thing is to get somebody into a transaction to find out, oh my gosh, we're gonna have to go to probate, and that was the house of my dreams, and now you have someone that's not real happy. So that being said, I hope that answers your question, Lacey. If not, drop that back into the chat and I'd be more than happy to answer it again. So Mary asks, I have an investor who wants to buy probate property. Would you recommend this? Would you recommend this? I would, as long as they're patient. And they understand that just because it's probate doesn't always mean that it's a great deal. Now, you might find that there are probates that are run down because it was a person that couldn't necessarily care for themselves, and so their property had become dilapidated a bit. You might find those. However, you're not going to find a great deal in probate, because when they go to probate, they have what's called an appraisal. An inventory and appraisal for the property. So if your investor goes in and offers $150,000, but the inventory and appraiser says even in the dilapidated condition that it's in, it's worth $175,000, that judge is going to look at it and they may say, we're not going to take that offer. We're going to take someone that's closer to what the value of the property is. So just watch that, Mary. Some people think it's a great bargain when in all essence it's not. Hopefully that answered your question. Roland, I will get you a copy of the presentation. Okay. Okay. All right. I think I've answered all the questions in chat. If you still have something, or I've said something since the presentation ended and you want some clarification specifically or in general, I'm truly here to help you guys understand it. Again, I'm not an attorney, but I want you guys to feel confident when you're going out on a listing appointment or when you're representing a buyer, that you have the right terms and the right words. So ask away. I'm here. Ian, did you wave at me, or were you just, oh, okay. Okay. All right. Yes, I will send the presentation. I'm going to screenshot just so I don't miss anyone on my email. So bear with me, because we had quite a few that couldn't make it today. So they won't get this, they won't get it. That being said, let's see, Anthony. Okay, absolutely, Anthony. I'll make sure that you get a copy. And if you guys want to hang out, great. I'll be more than happy to answer questions. Georgia? I know we've got one with you guys. Okay. All right. Well, you guys make it a great day. Thanks for stopping by. I'm here if you need me. Bye.